Hey, I bet you can't guess what I'm driving. 2 guesses. And the first one better not be a Volkswagen. More on that later.
Anything with an engine has always fascinated me. From the time I was old enough to hold a screwdriver, I was taking things apart. At 15, I got my first car, and my love for automobiles hasn't stopped since. I guess you could say I've had an affair with every car I've owned, and there have been many. I always have something on the go in the shop, and I want to share what I've learned with you. We're hitting the road to talk to people who collect, restore, preserve anything on wheels. So let's go!
So did you guess what I was driving? If you guessed a Franklin automobile, then you were right. Franklin was in business from 1902 to 1934. Franklin had many firsts in the industry. The first to use aluminum pistons. They built a range of cars all the way through V12s. Unfortunately, 1934 was the end for Franklin, but it lives on. We're here at the Northeast Classic Car Museum, where the largest collection of Franklin automobiles is housed, and it's not to be missed. There are just a wide range of things for you to see, and you need to come on down. Hey, you've seen this car in previous episodes. It's the Rover Air-Cooled Twin. But long before Rover had an air-cooled automobile, Franklin Motorcars of Syracuse, New York had developed a car. We're going to take a look at a few of those cars and see what they're all about. Hey, what's going on here? This car has a radiator grille, but no radiator. Well, it's a Franklin air-cooled car, and instead of the radiator, what they actually have is a large blower to blow air across its 6 cylinders. Now, this car's a 1930, and it was near its end of the production for Franklin over the 30 years that they were in business. And this, being one of the last cars, or the last 4 years of production, had probably the most advanced 6-cylinder engine at its history. But one of the things that Franklin should really be credited with is the number of firsts and the developments they made from 1902 forward. Franklin was one of the first cars to use aluminum pistons, and they pioneered that. They're one of the first companies to use a heat exchanger in their exhaust system. They're one of the first companies to have developed an air-cooled system that was reliable for large sedans. So in the 150,000 cars that they produced, this is one of the fine examples, and we're going to look at a few others. So we're here in Bovard, and we're looking at his 1910 barrel hood Franklin. Now this is a really eclectic car, and of course we've got an eclectic owner and driver as well. He's going to tell us a little bit about this car and how this engine is configured. So why this car?
I used to read books on cars, and they talked about the Franklin with their concentric valves, and none of them could explain it. I couldn't figure out how it worked from the description, so I figured the only way to find out for sure is to buy one and take it apart. Is that a good enough reason? So
if you want to take something apart, a Franklin's a good place to start, I guess. So why don't we start with taking apart the hood?
Okay.
Yeah.
Strap is on it. I've already unbuckled the strap. And the hood just comes off and set it in the grass. And then you can work on the car because there's no radiator being air-cooled.
Ah, so
you can just work on the car right there.
so we've got 4 cylinders here. We've got,
cylinders.
and these are the concentric valves we were discussing.
These are the concentric valves. This is the exhaust valve. That's the upper exhaust valve, and then you have the inlet valve.
Ah, I see. Concentric valves.
There.
Very.
The exhaust manifold, or excuse me, exhaust porting is actually going through the inlet valve, and it's a big hollow bell.
Really?
So that, yes, really.
Wow.
Maybe I should get out diagrams. But anyway, you notice that the whole engine's in a draft type box, I think is the proper way to say it. And the flywheel is a suction fan, and that draws air into the box past the fins on the cylinders, which is exactly where you want your cooling. So every cylinder is cooled equally. Very clever arrangement. Other things that are clever about it, it's a dual exhaust in that you have the exhaust up here that's controlled by these valves, and you have another set of exhausts down here that is ported by the piston. So when the piston comes down, it opens a port, blows the exhaust out into this manifold, and that one has a muffler because it's that first bark, or the first expansion of the gases in the cylinder that causes the bark.
Yeah.
So you put a muffler on that. But you need valves because when it comes down the next time, you're on your suction stroke and you don't want to suck in the exhaust from the other cylinders. So you have a valve that closes off at that point.
So quite an arrangement, almost two-stroke-ish in a way.
No.
In a way,
Four
where you
stroke.
open them.
Four-stroke.
I know, but in the way.
If it was two-stroke, you wouldn't need that extra valve.
That's right. That's right.
And
But
it turns out that many aircraft engines from 1910, 1915, before World War I, used that system well after Franklin did it. Franklin started in 1905 using that system, and there really were no aircraft engines in 1905. But like the Blériot that flew across the English Channel, right? You know that one?
Oh, yeah.
They used an Anzani engine, and they put those ports in. No valves, because on an airplane, everything's just open exhaust, and you don't have collection manifolds or anything else like that. Just open exhaust. And Anzani made a mistake. I shouldn't say made a mistake. They did it as an ad hoc add-on, drilling the holes around for the exhaust that's ported by the piston coming down.
Yeah.
They didn't think to put in longer piston skirts, so that when the piston is at top dead center, those holes went right to the crankcase. And the oiling was prodigious.
I'll bet it was.
Okay, so like I said, Franklin used these lower double exhaust system from 05 to 1911. Anzani did it in 1909, so Franklin had it first.
Well, it's quite an advanced car, really, when you think about this. It's quite an advanced engine for the age.
It's advanced and it's very Baroque. And if it was such a great idea, everyone would still be doing it. And realistically, this works fine on an engine that can only run at 1,500 RPM. And if you tried to do the same thing on a racing car, just get too much mass.
Too much mechanical stuff.
Too much mass, and they'd all float.
Right.
But the advantage of having the concentric valves on an overhead valve system is that if you have side-by-side valves, the valves can't have to be a little bit smaller than half the size of the bore.
Right.
Right. But if you put one inside the other, each one can be essentially the same
size as the bore. So great.
So huge valves for a small engine. But it only runs 1,500 RPM. So.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Quite a car. So we're going to come back and take a look at this a little bit. We're going to be maybe running and driving it.
Give it a few easy turns to get the fuel up into the cylinders. Then I'm going to turn on the ignition and give it a mighty crank, and if we're lucky, it'll start right up. Nope.
Hi, I'm Dirk Burrowes, and I'm on the set of Classic Drive Television. And to that end, we'd like to have you here too. Classic Drive is having a contest, and we're going to invite 3 enthusiasts with their cars to spend the day with us, learn all about them, and who knows, maybe even become a car star themselves. So, get your pictures together, tell us about your car, and send it to us to the address below. And make sure you check out our website and Facebook page for other details about this contest and upcoming episodes at Classic Drive Television. Hope to see you here. Hey, we're here with Mike and Nick. They are actually students at McPherson College in their automobile restoration program. And they've come out to the Franklin Trek and seen little things that they haven't seen before at the college, and to sort of learn a little bit more about those 20s and 30s cars that we see here now. Michael, how'd you decide that you were going to get into this and be part of the automotive world?
So in high school, I was working in a shop, and my mom introduced me to McPherson College, and I went out there and checked it out, and I fell in love and started working on old cars out there, and picked up an old car, a 42 Ford Super Deluxe, and then went home, worked on it a little bit, and then went into automotive restoration.
Jeez, that's great. and Nick, how did you decide to get involved with this?
Well, I initially went to school at Texas Tech, and while I was there, I was a part of the Formula Society of Automotive Engineers, and we build these little open-wheeled race cars. And after that, I graduated and started working in the real world. Wasn't quite what I wanted to be when I grew up, and so then I kind of started looking around, exploring my options. I found McPherson College, took a tour, fell in love with the program, and here I am.
There you are, there you are. So you guys are, you're going to go out in the world and you're going to be doing some real restorations. Mike, before the show you were talking about maybe even doing some resto mods, things like that. Any ideas? Is that what you're going to do with your Ford?
No, I'm going to keep that one original, but I went out and saw Barrett Jackson this summer, and they really introduced me to high-end customs, and that's what I really want to do someday.
So high-end customs. And what about you, Nick? What are you thinking about doing?
I would really like to get into working on European cars, particularly from the late 30s to the early 60s, in particular Porsches.
So we got a Porsche guy here. All right, very cool. Have you had a chance to work on any of those?
I actually have. I spent the past summer working in a Porsche restoration shop in Colorado.
So you're a senior, right? And you're a sophomore, yes, right? Sir. So you've got a couple more years at this. Are you doing any outer programs? Do they have any things like that?
So I came here through the school. They put me in contact with Matt Goist, and then I am doing work with Barrett Jackson on the side. I'm going out to an auction here in September, so I'm super excited for that, and then working on my own.
Oh, that's terrific. And what about you? You working on any projects? Are you doing some timeshare, working out in the industry?
Right now, like I said, I'm working at a Porsche restoration shop.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then my project that I'm working on while I'm at school is a 1966 Mustang with Fred Flintstone floor pans. So needs a little metal work done, but I'm excited to get involved get started working on that pretty soon. So
well, we're looking at the future here, and they're excited, they're motivated. This is where classic car restoration and the fever is going to go. Thanks for joining us.
Every classic car can tell a story. There's history in every single one of those miles. Others have been before you, sat in these very seats. Owning a classic means you tell the rest of the story. You can feel the past in your hands when you grip the wheel. This is about you and everything you love about classic cars. Tell your story.
Hey, we're back with Bruce Mail. He's a car collector extraordinaire, and we've actually got to see his Delahaye in just an unbelievable car. I've never seen anything as beautiful or lines as flowing as this. I guess that's why you were attracted to it.
Well, it's an interesting story. My wife and I were in London one January on vacation, and I decided to look at some car shows, venues.
Right.
And we walked past in Kensington, London, a place called Coys of Kensington, which is an auction house and a sales. And I saw this car in the window. And I just stood there and ogled and said, we've got to go in and see this car. We walked in, and I'd never seen a car. I didn't know what it was, but it was the most beautiful automobile I'd ever come across. And we had a nice discussion with the managing director, who told me that I couldn't buy it because it was their feature car in their next auction. And I said, well, let's work out a way that I can buy it. So we had a little deal, and I actually bought the car from the seller, but agreed to put it in their auction so they wouldn't have any legal issues.
Sure, sure.
And I was happy to do that. I put a reserve on it that was ridiculously high in order to make sure that I ended up with the car. And even though that was in London, I was back in Boston. I was on the phone during the auction, and some kind gentleman came within $25,000 of buying this car, which my heart was thumping over. But we did end up with it. Just as a historical thing, the car was one of 3 found in India in a pretty decrepit state. And the gentleman who recognized what they were bought them, brought them back to the UK, and that's where all 3 were restored. This is one of the 3. All 3 were painted in French blue, which is very nice, but I felt that black would show the car and its chrome and its curves a lot better.
It is beautiful, and black is the appropriate color for this car. Absolutely.
And I'm sure that Delahayes were made at one time in black. So.
Well, for the 30s, you know, it would have probably been.
Right.
So this car has some sort of interesting ways that the spare tire, fueling, things like that.
As well as it had a very advanced gear shift.
Really?
You know, it was an electronic hydraulic COTAL, C-O-T-A-L, gear shift, which was way advanced for the time. It's an electronic gear shift, and it has 4 speeds to the front and 4 speeds to the rear, should you want to do that.
Because it has a center reverse gear, so it can either way.
Exactly, exactly, yeah. So that makes it a little different. It's a joy to drive because you just go click, 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 and it changes gears.
Wow.
And if you'd like to see the trunk,
yeah, let's see.
We can handle that for you.
Yeah, let's take a look at this.
Take this side, unbutton those.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I think I left it undone.
This is pretty cool.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah. You know, this is all formed aluminum, right?
Yeah.
Look at that.
All handmade.
All handmade. So
you have the spare, you have the gas filler on the other side, and absolutely no room for luggage.
You know, it doesn't really matter where you're going. It matters what you're driving to get there, you know? So sitting in...
It's a touring car.
Yeah.
You find it comfortable.
Absolutely.
I find it comfortable. Easy to drive, especially if you're used to right-hand drives, which I am. Can't go above 50 or so because the fenders start to shake a little, but you know, we don't have to do more than 50 or 60.
You're touring, you're seeing things along the way.
Exactly. So, and it's...
Now, quite a unique shifting system. You were mentioning, you know, before we were talking, but it's right here on the left-hand side, almost a predecessor to a paddle shifter.
Right, it's called a COTAL gear shift. It's electronic hydraulic, so that you can just easily go from first to second, second to third, third to fourth, and in reverse. So you're right, it is like a little bit like a paddle shifter, except it was 50 years ago.
That's right. And now this is, 70.
70 years.
That's
You're
right.
absolutely right. My math is on.
So, but a clutch, so you use the clutch to shift?
Use the clutch to shift.
Right. And an inline 6.
Inline 6, which we can take a look at for sure.
Absolutely. And so, you know, again, it was an exciting story. You just sort of, you fell in love with it. It was love at first sight, really.
Absolutely. It really was.
I'd love to sometime go for a ride with you in this car. I mean, it's just, I bet you she's graceful though at under 50, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Graceful's a good term.
Graceful, right? You know, she's a genuine she. That's how you have to look at it, right?
Definitely a woman.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And women love this car.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Come on.
Whatever.
We enjoyed talking to Bruce again about his Delahaye. Just a beautiful car. Probably the most beautiful car I've ever sat in. Thanks for joining us at Classic Drive. We'll be back. Hi, I'm Dirk Burrowes for Classic Drive Television. In the 1930s, the running board era reached the pinnacle with this 1933 Marmon with a V16 engine. This car has a particularly interesting history. It was actually burned or set afire by an angry wife whose husband had spent the money on this car instead of a new kitchen for her. Join us for cars like this and others on ClassicDriveTV.com or join us on our Facebook page.
My name is Kim McCullough. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Jaguar Land Rover in North America. And we're here today at the 50th anniversary of the Jane Concord, Jaguar Association of New England.
My name is Mitch McCullough. I'm an automotive journalist and a vintage car enthusiast, and I'm here celebrating old Jaguars.
Yeah, so we brought with us a 1954 Jaguar XK120 OTS, which stands for Open Two-Seater, so a roadster basically. It has special significance to this club because the original owner, his name was Bernie Yurt, and he actually founded the club called the NEXA, New England XK Association, in June 1968. So this is 50 years on that he established the club. So we found this car, and we're actually only the second owners, even though it's a 1954. So it was destiny for us to bring it back and to celebrate and honor Bernie, who has since passed.
Yeah, hot rodding is very rebellious, or at least it was looked at that in the early days. It was, you know, the guys were going around and tearing up the streets and doing burnouts, but it kind of got a bad rep in the early days, and then they formed the National Hot Rod Association, which tried to get a lot of these younger guys back in the day off the streets and onto drag strips, and a lot of car clubs formed, and they were trying to kind of spin it in a positive way. In fact, a lot of car clubs, they actually would have a card, and the clubs were encouraged to go out and help people out. They saw a motorist beside the road, they were encouraged to stop and help them. And a lot of them actually give out a card, say I was helped out by such a hot rod club, and just to try and save face and kind of legitimize it a little bit. Yeah, cars find me more often than I have a pocketbook deep enough to handle it, so I have to kind of pick and choose the cars that come along. Yeah, these cars, I get calls all the time for cars that are in barns, and what I try to do is, right now my barn is absolutely full. I have no more room for any more cars in here. So what I try to do is I try to find homes for the ones that come up, just because it's, you know, I have the connections and trying to, I don't want to see the cars be turned into something that they weren't meant to be. So I try to find somebody that's willing to kind of be the next caretaker of them. Try to keep the tradition alive with, you know, myself and my customers, and then try to find new people that want to get into this traditional style of hot rod. My favorite part of doing what I do, I guess, is I love the interaction with people. I love being able to find a car and being able to preserve it, being able to research the history. That's paramount for me. I really, really enjoy the research part. Whenever I get a car that has some history, I start researching as much as I can. I look for old photographs, I make phone calls, I track people down, I track down the original builders, owners, and I do it for my customers as well. If they have a car that has some history, they think they might, I'll spend all that effort, and to me that's what's fun about it. It's being able to be the caretaker and preserve that history that, preserve it, and I also like to preserve the cars the way they were found. 15, 20 years ago, was you take these cars and you'd restore them to probably nicer than they ever were. In fact, most of the cars, these cars were put together by kids in their backyards with what they had. So there's a lot of, less than quality welds and stuff like that are done to them, but it's part of the car's history. So I don't eliminate that. I make sure it's safe. I make sure it can be driven. All the cars I do for customers are very drivable. I really kind of emphasize that with the customers, that let's make this car, instead of spending X, Y, Z amount of dollars on huge engines and huge horsepower, let's make it drivable. Let's make it so you can enjoy it. And that goes with the cars that have, these survivor cars that have peeling paint and they're faded, they have rust spots. It's a drivable car. You can take it out and enjoy it. You don't worry about parking lot dings. You don't want it to happen, but you take it out, you can just get in the car and have a good day in it. And that's what's fun for me.
The background of New England, we have a rich history, actually really dating back to the Andersons, where they had wonderful gatherings of friends here in the early days of the automobile, where they would gather and look at cars and talk about cars. This is a 64-acre parcel of land. That's their former residence, now known as Lars Anderson Park. This castle, if you will, or carriage house, was designed by Edmund March Wheelwright. He was the city architect of Boston, and it's hard to call this just a carriage house because of the exquisite appointment and architectural detail, but nonetheless it was a carriage house for the Andersons. And then later, with their growing collection of automobiles, as they collected between 1899 and 1948, it became home, or the stable, if you will, to that growing collection of cars. Since the 20s, the late 20s, there have been car shows here. We belong here. The ground is the hallowed ground for car activity. We have visitors of all kinds from all over the world. We have car guys of all kinds from all over the world. The Anderson collection are unrestored, preserved, and it's considered to be one of the most significant collections of historic cars in the Western Hemisphere because of that. And that was why the Fiat went to Pebble Beach, not only because of its significance as an automobile. It's been said that it's one of the 5 most significant pre-war cars in America.